Hi everyone, I'm Shira Cruz, serving as the Advocacy and Civic Engagement Associate at AAPI New Jersey. As a community organizer dedicated to championing the rights of Filipino migrant workers, I'm especially thrilled to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn session titled New Jersey Domestic Workers Bill of Rights Law, Empowering Domestic Workers and Employers. Thank you for joining us. AAPI New Jersey is honored to be joined by esteemed organizations at the forefront of championing workers' rights in our state for today's Lunch and Learn event. Today, we not only celebrate the landmark victory of the Domestic Workers Bill, but also emphasize AAPI New Jersey's steadfast support for the essential Bill of Rights. Recognizing that a significant proportion of domestic workers are women of color and immigrants, many of which are part of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. We are committed to standing with them and ensuring that their rights are safeguarded. We pledge to continue our support for domestic workers, leaders in New Jersey. We are committed to supporting employers and being champions of this law, which goes into effect in a few months. It is with great pleasure that we welcome our distinguished guests from the National Domestic Workers Alliance, including community organizer and domestic worker Evelyn Saz. From a young age, she first became involved in social activism during the Civil War in El Salvador. Evelyn arrived in the United States 7 years ago, and 4 years ago, she became acquainted with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. She was inspired by their struggle and organized domestic workers during the Writer Charter campaign. Currently, she is the lead organizer and coordinator of the Domestic Workers Coalition of New Jersey. Additionally, we are delighted to have Anna Barcy, Officer of Development at New Labor and a seasoned community organizer. Anna learned everything they know about organizing from New Labor members. A former full-time organizer, they are now dedicated to development to ensure that the movement of the working class people is well funded. Anna will be providing valuable insight on the bill and discussing New Labor's efforts to empower employers to advocate for their workers' rights. So let's welcome Evelyn and Anna, and I'll go ahead and pass it on to them.
Muchas gracias por introducirnos, Shaira, y estoy sumamente feliz de estar con ustedes pudiendo compartir parte de la lucha, el proceso de esta lucha que llegamos a ganar con tanto trabajo organizativo, ¿verdad? Y ahora podemos decir que tenemos una nueva ley que va a proteger a este sector laboral tan altamente descuidado, marginado, excluido de todas las protecciones. Así que gracias por recibirnos en este espacio y poder compartir nuestra historia. Se lo paso a Ana Barcy para que
our story. I'm going to pass it to Anna Barcy so she can introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am actually also joined here by Jen Garcia, who is actually just transitioned from New Labor, but who really was the organizer on the ground who won and worked with our members to win the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights. So I just want to say that. But I also, I work mostly in fundraising and coalition development for New Labor, meaning that I do a lot of outreach to folks who might not find themselves in domestic work, but want to do something about the deplorable conditions, right? And I'm specifically doing outreach to folks who are employers of domestic workers or who may know domestic workers or know folks who employ domestic workers. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. And thank you so much again.
Bueno, comenzamos. Bueno,
All right,
antes
let's start. And before we start, I want to mention, I ask you to please take a look at this picture. This picture has all the inspiration of all the organizations that fought really hard throughout this process to win victory in New Jersey for domestic workers. We can see the faces. I really enjoyed this picture. We can see the faces of all our colleagues from the coalition and other organizations that gave a very critical work so we could pass this Bill of Rights. And it wasn't because of the legislators that signed it or passed the bill in different committees or the governor that signed it. This was because of the organized fight and consistent that brought us this huge victory. I'm gonna pass it now to Ana Barcy because we are gonna be doing an icebreaker right now.
Yeah, we wouldn't be organizers, I guess, if we didn't force you guys to do an icebreaker. But we're gonna keep it really basic. And if folks feel more comfortable doing the chat, that's okay. But we want to understand, why you're here today, right? So we want to just go around and ask folks, what's your name? And you could share anything else you like if you're part of an organization, your pronouns, where you live. And then the big question is, why are you here to learn about the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights? What moved you to be here, right? And I can start. I'm Anna, as I mentioned. I live in Philadelphia, but I organize across New Jersey. And I've done organizing from, folks who are cleaning in restaurants to folks who are doing home care work for their family members. And I've just always been astounded by both how bad the conditions are, but also how amazing workers are. They are able to coordinate across separate households to win this Bill of Rights. Like as a domestic worker, you're relatively isolated, right? So it's really impressive what's been done, and I'm just excited to share and to think through next steps. I'm gonna pass it now to Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I live in Montclair. I'm a journalist, but I'm not reporting on this. I'm just here to educate myself and learn more about this issue. I feel like I should know more.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Really glad to have you. I'm gonna pass it to Jen now, Jen Garcia.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer, formal organizer with New Labor, domestic worker organizer. The reason why I'm here is because I'm on my lunch break and I miss everybody. That's why I'm here. But definitely respect to all of y'all. I guess I pass it on to Jeff.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeff, he, him pronouns. I'm with AAPI New Jersey. I'm just really excited to meet everyone and learn more about how communities can work together to really get this law implemented.
Thank you so much.
I'll pass it over to Lavi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alavi Raghavan, she, her pronouns. I'm involved with API Montclair, here to learn and like Jeff, to figure out how we can have strong coalitions to push these issues forward. Thank you. I'll pass it on to, Shara, pass it on to you.
Hi, everyone. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm Shira from AAPI New Jersey. Something that I do want to learn more about is specifically what the Bill of Rights look like. As mentioned by Laura in the chat, that out there a lot of domestic workers are Filipino, and a lot of them are within my own community. I want to be able to share and empower them as they are often providers for their family. I'll pass it back to you, Anna.
Thanks, Shira. How about I see that Amber wrote in the chat, thanks for being here from AAPI. And dealing with kids on spring break. Good luck. Really grateful you're here. Laura, you want to introduce yourself and why you're here?
Sure. Hi. I'm Laura, she, her pronouns. I live in Jersey City. I'm a community organizer here in the area. Yeah, I just wanted to like learn more about like what are what does the workers Bill of Rights look like now, like the updates. So I'm just excited to hear like what today's lunch and learn will look like, especially because I was just sharing like now I'm like meeting more like youth contacts, and it's interesting to just see like how like this is like a big thing for Filipinos because it's just coming up in like their like sort of like their parents or like or even for themselves. Actually, one contact that I know, they've just because like of their economic situation, they actually had to like get into that
Que algunas veces tienen que
like student just to like sustain themselves. So that's I think a big reason why I want to learn more about this.
Thank you so much, Laura. Susan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Susan Anderson. Hello.
Hi.
Excited to be here. I live in Montclair also, and I'm part of an AAPI New Jersey. I'm here because I want to learn more about the next steps and the implementation and working together. I know in our town, we do have quite a number of people who employ domestic workers and as well as residents who work as domestic workers. So I think it's just really important to figure out how we can implement the Bill of Rights and make sure that the folks who need to know about it get the information. So that's why I'm here.
That's super helpful to know, Susan. Thank you. I can't wait to follow up with you. And I think last but certainly not least, because Maria is our interpreter. Thank you, Maria. Lou, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. So I'm Lou from New Labor. Definitely here as we're a relation-based organization. This is about building relationships. So looking forward to doing that with AAPI, jumping at the chance to be able to do that, and knowing, the easy part was passing the bill in a way, even though it was a years-long fight. The hard part is actually getting to implement it. So, ZenDW has got a bunch of affiliates. We can only be in certain areas around the state. So we need to look beyond where we are located physically. So this is a great opportunity to be able to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. I'll just say really briefly, I also do a lot of work organizing in the Filipino community as well as Latino community in Central Jersey. And so really excited to connect with y'all and to create those connections across different languages, backgrounds, migration stories. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it back to Evelyn to go into the meat of our campaign and all the great work that was done.
Gracias, Ana, por
thank you, Anna, for this space, and so everybody can express why they're here. And I love that everybody's on the same page and understand what is that we're doing with this work. Briefly, I'm gonna introduce a little bit about the National Alliance of Domestic Workers. As an alliance of domestic workers, we consider ourselves as part of the social and progressive movement in the country. And we also focus on develop the leadership skills and abilities of domestic workers to win collectively and organized. And it's a movement that includes a lot of sectors, multilingual sectors, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and that help us to connect, to fight for all the racial justice, immigrant rights, labor rights, and for immigrants' rights. And most importantly is to get back what domestic workers didn't have their dignity, respect, and justice in this country as a sector of the economy that is increasing every day and that is very important like any other industry in this country. We have approximately 2.5 million domestic workers in the United States, and domestic workers are nannies, are the people that care for you in your home, and they're cleaners, so your homes are clean. And it's not so visible because they are working in homes isolated, but they're very important because they allow for other jobs to be able to function. The NDWA represents 70 local organizations, among them affiliates and chapters, and organized domestic workers in 20 states. And there are approximately 250,000 domestic workers throughout the country. Next one, please. This is a map that shows where we have one Bill of Rights. We have 11 Bill of Rights so far, and they're highlighted in green, the Bill of Rights. And I want to tell you that the first Bill of Rights that we won was from New York in 2010. And the last one that we won is the one that we have in New Jersey that we just won on January 12th. And that was extremely important because now that you're here, you're going to be the engine so more people can hear about this topic. And we also have local Bill of Rights, and they have been won where we had state Bill of Rights. You can see them in the map here, but we won't talk too much about it because we don't have time, but let's go to the next slide. All right, so there are 50,000 domestic workers in New Jersey that need to know that now they have protections and that there is a law that will protect them against any type of abuse or violation against their rights. And we have here 33,500 care workers, 10,500 cleaners that clean everyone's homes, and nannies, we have 6,630. So that's a huge engine for the economy of this country. Next one, please. And how did this started? Later, my dear colleague Anna will tell you about the story behind the local Bill of Rights, but the Coalition of Domestic Workers in New Jersey, we want to tell you how this idea was formed. And on May 11th of 2019, we started to talk about the need to have a fight in New Jersey for a Bill of Rights. And that's how we created the Coalition of Domestic Workers in New Jersey. This coalition at the beginning was formed by the NDWA, but there were also different sectors from Asia that were grouped in an organization called AAPI, then Casa Freehold, New Labor. Our colleagues and different colleagues are from New Labor, and Wind of the Spirit. And then we thought that it was necessary to amplify our work, and that's how Unidad Latina en Acción and Lazos de América joined the coalition. And the coalition has been growing by 106 organizations across the state, and they were the amplifying body of the voices of domestic workers. You can move forward. And on 2019, there was a need to carry out a study, and through Rutgers University, they interviewed more than 400 domestic workers, and the main results from that investigation was that a big percentage of those domestic workers was subject of wage theft. They had unstable schedules, lack of protections, and also the report found that 57% of the domestic workers was experiencing wage theft. 18% reported schedules that change from week to week. 54% of workers lack health insurance. 49% of workers lack paid vacations and sick days. 90% of workers don't have a written contract to protect them. So that information was crucial for us to take the necessary measures and tactics to launch our campaign. Next one, please. I think, actually, no, this is mine. But why is that we had that idea in New Jersey? If we have New York and Philadelphia right next to us who had won Bill of Rights previously, as I mentioned before, New York is a state where they won their Bill of Rights in 2010, and Philadelphia won it on 2019, 2020. And they already had the work of these affiliates, the work affiliates that I mentioned before, working really hard. And the people that came to these organizations were domestic workers. And they were already talking about tactics and strategies and how they could innovate and amplify the gain of rights. And as we mentioned before, the new labor organization also passed a domestic worker ordinance in Lakewood in the south of the state in 2014. And that happened way before we had this Bill of Rights. I think I'm going to pass it to you, Anna, so you can talk about this a little more extensively and about your experience winning this.
Yeah, and I'll just say Lou and Jennifer could probably speak to more of the particulars if we get to question and answer, but very basically, I think it's really important to just ground us in the fact, and probably many people here know, that domestic work in this country is built on the legacy of slavery, right? The folks who are doing housework in homes that could afford it were usually folks who had been enslaved, right? And after emancipation, these jobs were dominated by Black women. In the conditions or the laws may have changed, but a lot of the conditions remain the same, right? And we still see a large proportion of Black women workers in these jobs. And with the growth of migration to this country, we see a lot of migrant women. taking up these jobs, specifically folks who are undocumented, right? Because we're talking about like an excuse, basically, right, to give people pay that is below what most folks would expect, treatment that is just inhumane, etc., right? When we talk about the justifications for these kinds of abuse, right? We're no longer talking about, sanctifying slavery in our country, but we are still talking about sanctifying and allowing incredible abuse, right? And that's why, it's so urgent that we, to win pieces of legislation like this. And it's also so critical to just drive home the point that no matter what you take from this presentation, I want you to know that it is the workers themselves who did and who will continue to push back, right, and win, right? We needed worker leaders to win this legislation, and that's all rooted in a history here in New Jersey with a comité that started in Lakewood, New Jersey in the early 2010s, of mostly migrant women from across Central America. Lakewood, New Jersey is a highly segregated community between the white community, is mostly Orthodox Jewish community, and then Black and Brown community members, and most of whom, many of the Latina women work in the homes of the white community members. And so folks came together in the early 2010s to fight for a $10 minimum wage, which was well above the minimum at the time, $7.25. And they won like a commitment from the city leaders. They didn't just go to their individual employers. They knew that they needed some sort of systemic oversight or change. And so they pressured the municipal government to win an ordinance that stated that domestic workers should be paid $10 an hour. And of course, based on the slide that you guys just saw about the conditions of domestic work, right? Enforcement is the key, right? You can say we won this and it was based on the power of the workers, but we needed a whole movement to really sustain that work. It was the comité members who really led and understood that we need to go even beyond our city. We need a system change. We need a state level change. And so many of the comité members who won this back 10 years ago led the legislative drive for the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights. We can circle back to it later, maybe if Jen or Lou want to add anything, or if you want to add anything in the chat, but I'll pass it back. Here's a picture. This is our our comité. They have a chant that I can send to you all later. That's "Somos mujeres, no somos máquinas." We are women.
We are women, not machines.
Yeah, we are women, not machines. And yes, just super powerful. I'll send you all a video later. You can learn how to do the chant even with us if you come to one of our events. It's very powerful and fun and wonderful. Okay, I'll pass it back to you, Evelyn.
Me emociona realmente escuchar.
It's so exciting to hear from New Labor and to see all the beautiful work that you did in Lakewood for domestic workers so they could learn about their rights and to empower them to defend them in face of the employers and sometimes not great employers actually, and to work in an organized way. And in our campaign, we spent 4.5 years in the fight. We started in the summer of 2019, and then we achieved our goal on January 12th of 2024. And throughout that time, many things happened, and it would take me a whole day to tell you the stories of each of the organizations and their members and the excitement, the push, the fight, the crying, the emotions that we all had throughout this process. It was fantastic. And even right now, for all of us that went through it, get goosebumps. And we're gonna keep moving in the presentation. Thank you, Ana, before I get too excited. And this is a beautiful picture. This is the last part of our achievement, and we can see the smiling faces of all of us. And we have our sponsors there as well. Senator Brittany Timberlake, whose grandmother was a domestic worker, so she connected really well with all the domestic workers. We have Richard Cody as well, who was a senator back then. Now he's retired. And we see all the organizations that were part of this big effort. So this picture is super beautiful. We have Governor Murphy, who signed the document that said that now we had a new law in New Jersey. And I think that without discipline and preparation and follow-up, we would not have been able to achieve this, especially for domestic workers. Next one, please. And throughout this process, we also had strategic initiatives. One of them was to let people know about the needs of domestic workers. And this was not easy. And it was really hard for people to understand that domestic workers are out there. Even when we were doing the legislative visits in Trenton, many people, many legislators didn't know about the work conditions of domestic workers. They did have someone in their homes taking care of their children, their parents, cleaners, but they didn't know what they went through. And we had to do this educational part with the legislators. And the fact that the people that employ domestic workers, the public will know that we were developing this campaign and that it was huge fight, and we needed to explain people why it was important. That was part of our process to create that solidarity among other groups as well. That was key for the whole process of the campaign, not just to work with the 6 organizations that were part of the coalition, but to talk to other organizations and religious leaders and unions. That was very crucial because they had a very crucial role in this process. And so that we all could work together on the same page to approve this Bill of Rights in New Jersey. Next one, please. And how did we achieve this? Definitely with organized fight and with the people's power. We had to build power, and I want to mention that Virgilio Aran, my colleague, was in charge of the coalition of domestic workers. And because of his leadership and the leadership of all the organizations we were working with, we were able to consolidate a strong coalition with strong ties and clear objectives. And we were able to talk to other organizations so they could be on the same page. And it was amazing to create a base of domestic workers that at the end is the main part of this fight, and prepare domestic workers so they could give testimony, so they could talk to legislators and to give their testimonies and their stories. That was extremely impactful. Without those testimonies, I don't think we could have reached our goal. And we trained, capacitated people. We created forums about leadership, and there was something that was really important, and it was the calls that we made to the legislator's office so they could see the campaign. And we had to do a lot of phone banks to make those calls to their offices to let them know that we wanted them to approve this bill. That was amazing. And the development of the committees, trainings, the Know Your Rights trainings, and all that leadership training, lobbying that we did as well with visits to the elected officials' offices in their districts as well. And many of them, they were not expecting us, but we went anyways. And sometimes they would talk to us and sometimes they didn't, but it was also very helpful to identify who our allies were going to be, and the mobilizations, the marches, talking to other politicians, part of other coalitions was great because people got to know us and it gave us the opportunity to talk about our campaign. Next one, please.
Eso es de inglés. Oh, sorry. Solo para la gente a repasar.
So that you know, those are the English slides of what Evelyn presented. And what is that we won with this? We won a lot because we didn't have any of this before. And domestic workers didn't have rights. With this law that is going to be starting in July, we won that now we can have written contracts, that people can have protection for their privacy, and to include those domestic workers in the laws in New Jersey. Written contracts generally were verbally one-on-one with their employers, and they would tell them how much they were going to get paid and what hours and their duties. But what happened frequently is that after they did all the work, they will get paid less. They had to do other activities that were not contemplated in the contract. And many times also, the payment per hour was not respected. So now what we're expecting with this written contracts is that people get to an agreement between the domestic worker and the employer. And this is going to be a filter as well to identify good employers and who are the ones don't respect the domestic workers' rights. And also, we had case in 2021 of human trafficking with au pairs. That's a sector that is it's very small. They go and work in homes where people have a lot of money, and they hire agencies that are located in Latin countries and many other countries around the world. And these agencies capture these very young women between 21 and 27 years old. They offer a very appealing program telling them, we're going to pay you $3,000. And then with that program, they come with a J visa, and these women work on these homes, but they are the ones that are isolated. We had a case of very complicated situations where they got hit, he got humiliated, sexually harassed, and since they're so isolated, nobody knew. With the Bill of Rights, we're going to be including this sector as well. And now, regardless of if they work part-time, they're still going to get these protections in their workplaces. Next one, please. And this is just what I was saying before. Next one, please. Next one. Also, we have the rest time before domestic workers didn't have paid time to eat and rest, and that affects their mental health. And with this law, now domestic workers will have a paid time to eat like any other worker, and as well time to eat and to rest. And also protections against discrimination and retaliation when that happens, when domestic workers want to fight for their rights and they get fired. And in many cases, domestic workers were intimidated by their employers when they told them that they were going to be deported because they didn't have a regular status in this country. So that made the situation very difficult for these domestic workers. Many of them are single mothers or the breadwinners in their home, so that's why they couldn't do anything. And another big thing will be the notice prior to termination. Many people got fired the day before without notice, and this affected their finances. So I think because they had to pay their bills, and if they lost their job from one day to the other, they couldn't front those bills. So now the bill says very clearly that the employer has to give 2 weeks of notice prior to termination. And if they don't tell them, then the domestic worker needs to get paid. And if they live in, they need to get between 3 weeks and a month of notice so they can find another place to live in, so they don't have to live on the streets. Next one, please. And briefly, the law includes this sector and it has different exclusions, and one of them is people that take care of family. Also excluded will be the people that work temporarily. For instance, if they worked only in the month, only 5 days, they're not going to be included, or unpaid family members under 18 years old. Next one. And yeah, we had many difficulties. Among them, there was opposition, and we had to find different strategies and tactics to neutralize them. One of the biggest ones were the au pair agencies. We had to organize this sector, and it was very difficult because of the isolation that they were living in. And in the case of the home cares, in the last years of the campaign, we thought that everything was going well, and then the agencies, the home care agencies and the hospital corporations started to go to the legislative visits to give testimonies against us. And then we organized a base throughout 2023 to prepare home cares in their leadership to give testimonies. And we were able to achieve it. We were able to be heard. And at the end, the opposition was neutralized in the sense that they were not testifying against us, and that was good. Another thing is that we need to move from a comfort status to fight mode. So we did the leadership trainings, forums, and help the base and the organizations to move to a more concrete base. Next one. And I'm going to pass it to Anna for this one.
Thank you so much. I do believe that we're running short on time for our wonderful interpreter. So I just want to mention that I can offer, and perhaps my colleague Lou can offer consecutive interpretation. If you need to leave, Maria, thank you so much. But I'll just mention, I think as we wrap up, so many things that we've learned. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is in English, which is how we need to continually be reaching out to workers, right? From our win and our fight in the early 2010s to the passage of the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights in January. We need a movement that's never going to let this go, because a law is great, right? But a law that's not enforced by the people who are directly affected, specifically the workers, but also their employers, sometimes their family members, right, are the employers of caregivers, right? A lot of caregivers are there for elderly parents or for disabled children, etc., right? This has to be a movement of all of us, right? We need to come together and we need to help to implement the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights. And so there's a lot of really great ways we can do that. We can, like folks were mentioning, I think Lavia was mentioning in the chat, we need to understand, where are the domestic workers? Who are they? What do they care about, right? And what parts of the law are they seeing enforced and what are they not? So if
Puede
you
ver
are
esto enforzado, ¿no? Y si están interesados en participar con nosotros,
particularly in North Jersey, we need to understand where people are, and all the things I just mentioned. Sorry, I'm not going to repeat myself. But we need to knock doors. We need to talk to people. We do things like create contact trees where we just kind of trace who we know in our communities, right? Just in my own personal life, I know several domestic workers, right? Both as friends and as folks who have worked for my family members at the Jersey Shore. We can sit down and map that out, right? Additionally, additionally, and also the kind of the next step for that outreach is we need to train domestic workers in these rights. They need to understand them and be able to form comités in their part of the state. We want to expand what we have in Lakewood across the state, right? And if you want to work with me directly, a really key way to do that is to actually go through the employers, right, of domestic workers. In this workplace, the dynamic can be so hot or cold, right? An employer can be extremely abusive. There's so much that goes into that. The worker is isolated. There's a sexist and racist undertone to a lot of the work. And then there's a flip side. There's people who genuinely want to be collaborators with the domestic worker in their home, who really like appreciate the work that's being done to help raise their children, for example, right? And who want to champion the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights. At New Labor, we've actually highlighted and celebrated people who take proactive steps not only to enforce the law, but to go beyond it, to offer people higher pay than the minimum wage, right? We've been championing that in Lakewood a bit with one-to-one negotiations with employers. And when we celebrate them, we call them high road employers. I'm just going to skip ahead to that piece really quick and say that we have a long history of doing that work. We actually, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we celebrated restaurant owners who sent their workers to get trained in COVID-19 protections and allowed their workers to go get vaccinated while on shift at local vaccination stations. And what we did was we basically celebrated them. We put them on Rutgers pages. It was an incentive, right, for these employers to do the right thing, right?
Que estos trabajadores, estos empleadores hicieran lo adecuado.
Everyday people who have
Y
necessarily need to be like famous. Like, you know, they're not like a restaurant owner, so they don't rely on the publicity as much, of course, but it's still a community building thing, right? We want to do high road employer programs where we could then break bread together, eat together afterwards, create community where right now there's isolation and segregation in a community, right? So, long story short, if that's something that you're interested in, whether it be from the perspective of employers or the employees, and thank you, Lou. Lou is translating. Lou está traduciendo en el chat. Gracias, Luis. Y podemos hacerlo por Evelyn en el chat. We're going to do the same translation in the chat, transcribed, now that our interpreter has had to leave. Yeah, so just to finish, and then I'll pass it back to Evelyn for any closing remarks. This is the form to sign up if you want any kind of follow-up, right? If you want to do a little or you want to do a lot, no pressure. We'll work with you specifically to figure it out. So that's it from me. I'm gonna go back to the slide. I don't know, Evelyn, if you want to make any closing remarks, and then maybe we can take just a few minutes for questions.
No, no, Ana, yo creo que nada más es que visualicen las fotos que están acá, Ana, y nada más hablar que esto así estábamos nosotros, ¿verdad? Luchando dentro del Senado, en las visitas legislativas, ese tipo de cosas, nada más la visualización. Y si tienen alguna pregunta.
Yeah. As Lou is writing in the chat, basically, this is who we are, right? This is the proof of our campaign and the incredible work we did. You can see folks from ADICAR, Unidad Latina en Acción. And so any questions that y'all have, please, we'll make sure to interpret them.
Thank you, Anna and Evelyn. You kind of touched base on it earlier, but what are some of the steps that individuals and organizations can take to help implement or help ensure that this law is, um, you know, carried out and that domestic workers learn about the rights that they now have won?
Yeah. So I already went over my portion, which is really on the kind of high road program and the enforcement side. I don't know if Evelyn, you want to add anything around steps people can take in their immediate community. Evelyn, si tú quieres agregar algo que la gente pueda hacer para implementar la ley.
Bueno, sí, es fundamental que ustedes se vuelvan los voceros de esta ley, que cuenten que existe esta ley y si ustedes tienen trabajadoras del hogar en sus casas, que no dudo que se vuelvan buenos empleadores y motiven a la trabajadora del hogar para que también pueda conocer más sobre sus derechos y pueda aplicarlos.
Yeah. Lou is translating in the chat, but it's really about becoming an ambassador of the law, right? And I'll just add to that that what we've been doing with a couple of organizations across the state is doing collaborating on like graphics that we put out on social media that might speak about the specific intersection. Like for example, I've been doing work with like Please Say Gay New Jersey, right, where we're going to talk about the gendered aspect and the even transphobia and homophobia that can go into like the feminization of domestic work, right? So, for example, we could talk a little bit about, if you're representing different organizations, the intersection for your particular community. What does domestic work look like? And what does a conversation about domestic work then look like in your community? And I think a next step there would also be, we can host a training or just a social with members of your organization to talk about this, talk about it in a way that doesn't push people too much, but just speaks to the law, gets their feedback on it, maybe their questions, maybe even people's hesitations. That's okay. I want to do that kind of follow up with you and your orgs.
Thank you so much. Before we close, is there any other questions that we can uplift in the chat? All right. Sounds like there are no questions left. It is the end of our lunch and learn. Thank you so much